Who am I? This is a very important question that I have recently asked myself. And no, it doesn't mean that I'm suffering from memory loss or have an identity crisis. It simply means that being Polish, I'm curious of how the history of my country influenced me and the generations before me. Centuries of various events, some of them planned and some unexpected. Some of them wanted and some undesired, some tragic and some happy, but all of them shaping the silhouette, the nature and the ambience of this land. My land, Poland. My name is Damian Urbańczyk, and I would like you to become a part of my journey through the 1,000 years of history of Poland. People are gregarious animals, and very often we feel the need to belong. And places such as Ostrów Lednicki give us the sense of historical identity. Here, Mieszko I might have been baptized with his entire court. Here, Dąbrówka might have lived. Here, Bolesław the Brave might have been born. And although these are only speculations, they prove how important these things are still for us. Because of events which happened 1,000 years ago, we can still call ourselves Polish. If I asked who are we as Poles nowadays, we would say predominantly white, almost 90% Catholic, but who were we as a nation over 1,000 years ago? And could we consider ourselves a nation then?
The name Poland actually only appears in the 11th century, although the very fact that people referred to each other as Slavs gives us a clue that there was some sense of shared identity of people speaking similar language. There must have been some sense of belonging because it appears in Gallus Anonymous's chronicles, but referring to Slavs and the land they occupied. But Poland, where did the Polands come from? Were there even Polands? That's a good question. At the time, the foundation of one's identity was the tribe or clan, belonging to a lineage.
Then we were known as Civitas Sinesge, which is country of Gniezno, with one ruler, Mieszko I. Who was he?
In the first half of the 10th century, in the area of central Greater Poland, right here where we are now, on Ostrów Lednicki, between Poznan and Gniezno, someone begins building large fortified settlements. Mieszko I appears in historical sources sometime in the 960s, and he is already the leader of a political entity that has to be considered by, among others, the empire in its geopolitical calculations for this part of Europe. And that's what's fascinating, that this Poland, the state that later came to be called Poland, seems to appear out of nowhere. Suddenly, in some forest among scattered tribes, a new power emerges, one that others have to reckon with. That's incredible. You could jokingly say we're presenting the Big Bang Theory here.
The ruins on Ostrów Lednicki inspired many legends and myths through the centuries. There is a walled ducal palatinate with a baptistery and a church inside, which created a hypothesis that the baptism of Mieszko I and his entourage took place here. Can we be 100% sure that it actually happened here? Of course not. It might have taken place in Regensburg, Poznań or Gniezno, but we are sure that it actually happened. And the effects of this event are still visible in Poland. There is one very important event that we associate Mieszko with. He got Poland baptized. Well, maybe not personally, but he achieved this goal.
The baptism of Poland is a phrase deeply rooted in Polish historical tradition and memory. In the 10th century, the baptism of a ruler effectively meant that the state was recognized as Christian. What's more, Mieszko began the process of Christianization. In historiography, this event is almost synonymous with the beginning of the Polish state. There's this accepted narrative that it was a strategic move, that Mieszko calculated that it would benefit him, so he decided to convert. But then in the chronicle, it's suggested differently, that his wife threatened that she wouldn't let him into her bed until he accepted baptism. So what else could he do? But who baptized Duke Mieszko, and where? And when? That's a subject of debate. The traditionally accepted date is the year 966.
14th of April.
The exact date is probably more symbolic.
Poznań, now the capital of the Greater Poland Voivodeship, in medieval times was one of the most important cities in the country of Mieszko I. And this church of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Summo is pointed as a place where Mieszko I might have been baptized. Do you know that for sure? Of course we don't. But what we know is that in 968 the first bishopric was established in Poznań, with Jordan becoming the first official bishop. And this is a remaining symbol of Christianity entering our country. So what were the consequences of Poland being baptized?
The strengthening of the state was something Mieszko himself may have felt right after his baptism. If earlier he had lost battles with the Veleti, then the following ones were victorious. So he may have seen a direct benefit. Poland, or rather Mieszko's state at the time, became a serious player on the European stage. An expansion followed. The annexation of Lesser Poland, Silesia, which were very vast areas, also shows how clever Mieszko was as a politician. At first, he allied with the Czechs, and then ended up taking significant lands from them. This allowed him to create various dynastic ties. So, in today's language, we could say it definitely improved his PR or political standing in Europe. Baptism also gave this emerging state access to the vast civilizational achievements of Christian Western Europe. Here we see the ruins of the Palatium, the early Piast residence. Strangely enough, before the baptism, such structures didn't exist in Poland. The art of masonry architecture hasn't developed. The question is, in medieval Europe at the time, was there any chance for a non-Christian political entity to survive? Probably not.
Let's allow our imagination run unbridled and picture this little island as a literal place of the baptism of Mieszko I. This might have been a starting point of our history, a cornerstone of Poland, an area from where Mieszko I started uniting its nation and later expanding its borders. How does it feel to work in the history field, not being sure of what happened when, because there's lack of source materials?
Are there really only a few sources? We are surrounded by a great number of archaeological sources. The question is, are we capable of asking them the right questions? Maybe it happened one way, maybe another. Presenting different versions only shows how fascinating it is that so much is still waiting to be discovered. Imagine you're traveling along the Piast route, guided by different people at each stop. You start in Gniezno. After all, we were all taught it was Poland's first capital. But then in Gniezno, someone insists, no, Gniezno was the real capital. In Poznan, you're told, that's not true. Poznan was the most important. And finally, you arrive in Ostrów-Lednicki, and here, this is where the baptistry was. This is where the baptism really happened.
Island of Mysteries. This is how Ostrów-Lednicki can be called. An island on the lake between Gniezno and Poznań, two very well-known centers of the medieval Polish state. Today, thanks to extensive interdisciplinary research, we can reconstruct the history of the island's stronghold, thus supplementing the knowledge we get from the written sources, which unfortunately say very little about this place and its times. Which sources are more important for discovering our history? Those that we can find in libraries or those that we can find in the ground?
It depends on what we want to learn or extract from these sources. Written sources, which historians mainly rely on, tell us about major events. But what we get from archaeological research can tell us about the everyday lives of ordinary people. The ones the chronicles are silent about, as they were the backdrop.
Why is archaeology so important in such places? Because when we walk around, I see dirt, you see history.
Archaeologists learn during their studies how to tell whether something is modern-day trash. Although even that might be interesting to someone doing research in 1,000 years. Because, after all, a piece of pottery we find now was just garbage 1,000 years ago. We learn to pay attention to things others might walk past.
Zwraca się uwagę na coś innego niż tak jak każdy, kto po prostu przejdzie obok tego, a my, mamy coś.
It is fascinating how people's perception of the world differs and how much we can learn from each other. Scholars, archaeologists, and medievalists try to unearth what is buried and try to explain something that is very often hidden in plain sight. And although we, the common people, rely mainly on written sources, we should keep in mind that even though something hasn't been described, it doesn't mean that it didn't exist. It is most certainly just waiting to be discovered. Years of work, approximately 180 years of work here in Ostrów. Why can we assume that it was a very important place for Poland and for Christianity in this area?
Jan Długosz wrote in his chronicle that by his time, this place had already been abandoned and uninhabited. But, as he noted, the elders remembered more than what had ever been written down. According to their memory, the first cathedral of Gniezno once stood on this island. It was later moved to Gniezno because the location was considered inconvenient. This tells us that even in the Middle Ages, people may not have known exactly what stood here. But by the 15th century, they believed it had been something significant. As for what this place might have been, and the role it played during the time of Poland's first rulers, this is where archaeology provides real insight. And we know that there was, in fact, a palace here, which was expanded around the year 1000.
Palatium, in English palace, is a place where historians speculate that, for example, Dąbrówka could live.
Rulers had their main residences. One of them was Ostrów-Lednicki. whether it was the main one or her favourite. As some novels, especially modern ones, suggest, we can say with 99% certainty that she stayed here.
That's a big probability. What makes you assume that it was a place where Poland got baptized? Poland, of course.
Exactly. Not the baptism of Poland, but the baptism of the ruler, meaning Mieszko. 2 recesses were discovered in the palace chapel, each shaped like half of an equal-armed cross. That's why art historians interpret them as remains of baptismal pools. To be clear, not all scholars agree with this.
So how has our knowledge changed about this place throughout those 180 years?
Back when Raczyński wrote about this place, or when Sokołowski later conducted research here, only the palace was known. Then came further excavations, the discovery of the stronghold's church, the remains of 2 bridges connecting the island to the mainland, a cemetery, and remains of wooden houses that once stood here. So we're learning more and more, not only about the most important buildings, like the palace and the church, but gradually we're also learning more about everyday life, not just that of the rulers.
How much did the baptism of Poland influence ordinary people?
Graves tell us about these changes. In pre-Christian times, cremation was practiced. The dead were burned on a pyre and placed in urns. With Christianity came inhumation, skeleton burials. So someone dies, and their body is laid in a grave. Thanks to this, we now have the ability to excavate these cemeteries.
The reign of Mieszko I may be described using 4 elements: the earth of the motherland, the fire of combat, the water of baptism, and the wind of change. And the best part is that although it is still very often a maybe, every single year we learn more about the world which is long gone, thanks to the passionate work of archaeologists and historians. The world of Mieszko I from the 10th century and the world of Damian Urbańczyk from the 21st century. 2 realities so different and yet so similar, with desires, cravings and the needs of people both living then and now. 2 realities separated by millennia and sealed with one event, the baptism of Poland. Why should we care about something that happened over 1,000 years ago?
In reality, everything that happened 1,000 years ago, though it may not seem like it, does have relevance today.
So what did this baptism give us?
For Mieszko, it was undoubtedly a very important political decision, and not an easy one. Rejecting the old gods, rejecting the previous religion, that surely wasn't simple. We know that a pagan uprising happened shortly afterward, and you could say Christianity took a long time to truly take root. It wasn't like he got baptized and suddenly everyone else followed.
And yet we are sitting in Poland, which is mainly Catholic, so there have been consequences.
In many countries, the decisions made 1,000 years ago still have an impact today. We have a great number of churches. Holidays are still celebrated. Rituals are observed that, incidentally, were annexed and adopted from pagan traditions. They've just been slightly altered.
We refer to Mieszko I as a prince, but Widukind calls him Rex, and Ibrahim ibn Yaqub Malik, and they both mean the same thing, a king. But whether he was a king or a prince is not as important as the fact that we should call him the father of our nationality. Because whenever we think of Polish identity, 966 comes instantly to mind as a year when our country got united for the first time. What would Mieszko I think if he appeared in Poland in the 21st century?
I think he would be incredibly surprised by what the world looks like today. We often run workshops with kids at the museum, and I try to convince them that history is worth paying attention to, because it really does affect our lives now. I tell them that, for example, humans have already invented pretty much everything. So I think he'd be just as surprised as the kids are when I show them a ladle and tell them it's just a scoop or a dipper, an everyday item that we all have at home.
Do you think that people now are proud of being Polish, of our heritage?
Are we proud? Well, I think sometimes because of everyday problems and worries, we simply forget that we should be proud of being Polish.
Z tego właśnie, że jesteśmy Polakami.
Poland is simply spectacular, both visually and historically. And it is amazing that we can still appreciate its beauty and its legacy. And I'm very proud to be with you during this journey through my country's past.